Moving on to our last presenter for the day, and that is Syntara Limited. Syntara has a ASX code of SNT. It has a market cap of approximately 20 million. Syntara is a clinical stage drug development company targeting extracellular matrix dysfunction with its world-leading expertise in amine oxidase chemistry and other technologies to develop novel medicines for blood cancers and conditions linked to inflammation and fibrosis. Presenting for the company today is CEO Gary Phillips. Gary, welcome to the Hidden Gems webinar, and please take it away.
Okay, so Syntara, the session today is called Hidden Gems. I'm going to explain to you why Syntara is indeed a hidden gem. Many of you will be maybe used to investing in biotech companies, others not. It can be a bit daunting with the amount of science that's involved. I'm going to explain why our valuation at the moment is low, what's been driving that, and why this particular point in time is an opportunity with the company about to emerge out of a restructuring and going forward. I'm also going to explain the validation behind the science that's there and who's invested, who's joined, that you can look to, has done diligence on the company already. If you can skip forward 2 slides, please. Thank you. So we are global leaders in one particular kind of chemistry and one particular enzyme called lysyl oxidase. I'll explain what that does in a moment. The science behind this has been published in Nature. Nature is the highest hitting publication globally for scientific. So whenever any scientists try and publish stuff, they start with Nature, and if that doesn't get accepted, they go lower. We've got 3 in the last couple of years on the science that we've had. We're just coming out of a restructuring, so we've just sold off a manufacturing plant and a commercial business, which secures us $14 million in savings per annum and a long-term royalty stream. It also puts us in a good place with the funds to complete the clinical trials that we're currently engaged in. We raised 10 million in an equity raising in December of last year. We're strongly supported by specialist healthcare funds, with the company being 60% institutionally held. And they're there because they can see the value in the clinical trials that we're engaged with. For those of you who invest in biotech, you will know that when the rubber hits the road, when the valuations really lift off, is when you generate data from what we call phase 2 clinical trials. These are the first trials that are done in patients as opposed to healthy volunteers. And it's the first time that anybody gets to look at both the safety and efficacy. How well does the drug work in those patients? So if you can produce positive data in those studies, that's generally the time when you see 5 times, 10 times appreciation in stock price. The drug and the disease that we're focused on is myelofibrosis. That's a bone marrow cancer. So these are all diseases where there are cancers involved in the blood, and in particular myelofibrosis, a cancer in the bone marrow. This is an area where we're a really high unmet need, as I'll explain, and a drug which is in phase 2 trials due to report results before the end of the year. Syntara is also not a one-shot wonder. There's just not one technology here going forward. We also have, in total, 4 phase 2 studies that should deliver results by the middle of 25. Middle of 25 is important because we have the funds to reach that point. Really important point in valuation. The next slide, please. So with such a positive outlook, why is the share price and the enterprise value of Syntara currently only $13 million? That's really low for a biotech company with 1 drug in phase 2, let alone 4 trials underway. So first of all, I think the market is still getting its head around the restructuring that we did in Q4 of last year. As I mentioned before, that took $14 million of costs out of the business. The cash balance that we're currently showing of 7 million is augmented by 2 things. One is the cost, the cash we still expect to get from that transaction that we completed in Q4 of last year, which totals $6 million plus another 1 million from a security deposit when we hand back the lease to the facility that we've sold. And secondly, an R&D tax credit that we expect later on this year. So that in total comes to a further about 10 or 11 million. So we're looking here at a company with a pro forma cash of around about 16 or 17 million dollars. And I say that's the funds enable us to take these trials through to the middle of 25. So markets probably hasn't quite woken up yet to the difference between the cash balance, the pro forma cash we have, and the funds that we have that take us through to the end of those trials. Secondly, look at the register. If you're looking for endorsement, you'll find it in spades in the register. DNA Income at 20%. They're a UK specialist fund that we've been with for a long time. Platinum Investment Management, run by one of the leading healthcare investors in Australia, Bianca Ogden, went from 8% to 20% in the capital raise in December after doing a lot of diligence on the company and its asset. BVF Partners is a US West Coast investor, again, a specialist healthcare investor. Don't invest in many Australian stocks. We're one of very few. They're just under the 10% mark. Again, I've done a huge amount of diligence and have visited the company in Sydney to look at what we do, and got a lot of confidence in the team that we have. And below the line, just under the 5% mark, are other specialist investors that came in on the last capital raise, having done diligence and talked to the clinicians globally that are involved in the trials that we're running. One of the shareholders that we had prior to the investment raise last December was a fund called Cars Peak. They owned 12% of the company. Their stock was held in a fund which had closed 12 months before. We were the last stock in the fund and they had to exit. They exited in the first part of 2024 at a price which was lower than the offer price for the raise at that time. So some of that money went into the hands of the register that you see. Some of it went into hands that are people that are interested in more short-term profits. So there's a small overhang on the share on the register, which we think is working its way through, likely to come to an end soon. So that's driven the share price to where it is. And for the first time last week, we generated an increased volume, which resulted in the share price going up rather than down. So we think we've seen the end of the share price overhang, and the company is really ready at this point to launch forward based on the news flow that we have coming. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. The board of Syntara, another validation. The chair of the company is Dr. Kathleen Metters. She was the head of basic research at Merck, Global Merck, had a budget in the billions, $3 billion. She's somewhat of a pharma and biotech rock star. Having retired from those businesses, she joined us. I think we were her first board appointment. She's here because she really believes in the science we have and the team that we have. Simon Green was the head of plasma research R&D at CSL for amongst other roles for more than 20 years. So Simon comes to us a really experienced healthcare executive within the Australian context. And Hashan De Silva is a well-known biotech and healthcare analyst who joined the board after doing diligence as being part of a fund beforehand. He doesn't invest, let alone join boards of companies unless he fully believes in it. So a really strong board that gives a strong endorsement for an investment you might be considering. Next slide, please. The technology we have is a LOX inhibitor. LOX inhibitors block the cross-links in collagen. So in a simple way, if you cut yourself and the body floods the area with collagen, so protein fibers, and then an enzyme called lysyl oxidase, which causes cross-links between the collagen fibers, that leads to a stiff scar structure. You can equate it to buying a sheet of fiberglass, a floppy fiberglass from Bunnings, and adding a hardener, which forms the fiberglass to go into a hard crust. The same thing happens in our body. We have a drug which fully blocks lysyl oxidase. It stops the cross-links in the collagen. The hardener stops the hardener, which means that the fibrosis, the scar tissue, reverses. That means that we can undo fibrosis in the organs where it's affecting it. Too much fibrosis in your organs leads to damage and a loss of function. Next slide, please. This science, as I mentioned, has been published in Nature, at the top-notch, the highest impact rating journal in the world, by several different investigators that we've been collaborating with. Next slide. I'm only going to talk about one of the diseases we're tackling today, and that's myelofibrosis. This is a disease of the bone marrow, where the bone marrow is the body's production unit for red cells and white cells and platelets. We can stop the fibrosis in the bone marrow, and that means that these cells can start functioning again and producing the red cells and white cells. This is a disease which kills people in 5 years. We've already done one study which shows we reverse the fibrosis and improve red cells and platelets. This is an area where companies that have produced phase 2 data, one beyond the study that we're currently in, have exited and have been bought by larger companies for in excess of 1.5 billion, 3 of them in the last 2 years. Next slide, please. We reported on a study that we completed in where the drug was used on its own in patients who were end of life at the end of last year, where we showed a reduction in fibrosis and improvement in the bone marrow function. Next slide, please. And we're currently engaged in a study where the drug will be used on top of the current standard of care, which generates $2 billion a year in revenue. And we're expecting to show results of this later in this year in December. This study is currently 60% recruited. We expect to see it fully recruited by the middle of the year, generating positive news flow, and then a data from this study in the first week of December. That will be the point where people get to see the efficacy and safety of our drug, and there's a real opportunity between the full recruitment and the data coming out to see share price appreciation. Next slide, please. So just to conclude, the myelofibrosis study is ongoing. It's nearly fully recruited. We expect data in the last part of the year. The other rows on this chart just show the other studies that we are putting in place at the moment and expect to deliver results on by the middle of 25. And if you remember, that's the time when we expect the funds to go through to. So we are not a one-shot on goal, and there's lots of opportunities here for share price appreciation. Next slide, please. And the last slide, just to show the news flow that's coming up. So what can you expect that's going to drive valuation in the next 6 months? Well, we've already reported on the recruitment stages of the myelofibrosis study. We'll expect to report on that as full recruitment by the middle of the year. We have a study ongoing with Fiona Wood over in Perth, the burns doctor, where we're looking at skin scarring. We expect to report on recruitment of that study and an update on clinical development with her, again, around the middle of the year. And then that really important point is the data from the myelofibrosis study in the final part of the year. So it's a really exciting time for Syntara shareholders and a real opportunity with the share price sitting where it does at the moment. Thanks, Manny.
Okay, Gary. Thank you for that. Again, exciting times. There's certainly a fair bit of news flow to come. It looks like you're at the pointy end for a few of these, and as you've mentioned, you have 4 of these trials ongoing at the moment. So it's not just the one. Okay, so let me ask you. There was a question that's come through, which I think you've addressed. What is the addressable market for myelofibrosis? And I think on one of your slides you put up, I think you had $1 billion on there. Is that about right?
Yeah, so I think it's probably under us, the conservatives. So the current sales of the leading drug in this area are around $2 billion, and that drug only leads to symptomatic improvement of the patients with myelofibrosis. So it helps them live a better life, but it doesn't extend their life beyond 5 years because it doesn't address the fibrosis in their bone marrow. Our drug will reverse the fibrosis in the bone marrow and work together with that drug to help these patients not only improve their symptoms, but also to live longer as well.
All right. What about the status of partner discussions? There must be a fair bit of interest now, given the point at which these trials are at. Are you seeing a lot of interest from some of the larger players in the space? Are you getting a few knocks on the door?
Absolutely. Well, we don't necessarily wait for knocks on the door either. We go looking for them. So there's several partnering conferences per year in the biotech pharmaceutical world, which people attend and share their information and talk to people that might be interested. We've started to generate a lot of interest because we published data on the first study we did with this drug in myelofibrosis in a monotherapy sense. So we used it in patients who'd failed on the first drug, had about a year to live. And we published that and presented that data at the world's largest hematology conference in America in December last year. That generated interest because people can see that the drug is doing what we said it would do. It's reversing fibrosis, and those patients were improving. The study we're currently doing is on top of the current standard of care, the JAK inhibitor. A lot of companies have JAK inhibitors. They're looking to see what they're going to do next. They're looking for other drugs which will help them improve patients further. Those are the companies we're talking to, the GSK, Novartis, Bristol Myers Squibb, Insights of the world.
Okay, great. We've got an interesting question that's actually come through, and I should ask it. One of our participants has asked whether where the study is based for your Parkinson's trial and whether it's possible for them to volunteer to be involved in the study. And if so, how do they go about doing that?
Oh, well, if they email me afterwards, I'm more than happy to give them details of where we're recruiting. But it's basically one site in Sydney and one site in Oxford in the UK. That study is fully funded by Parkinson's UK, so it's actually a great deal for Syntara shareholders. It's a non-dilutive funding to deliver a result in a study where these patients have a sleep disorder, which is very severe, and where 90% of those patients go on to develop Parkinson's. So we're looking at early stage patients who are developing Parkinson's as opposed to already have full-blown Parkinson's.
Okay, and just to finish up, on the balance sheet, you spoke about the cash balance, the pro forma cash balance. So the balance sheet's now funded to support your activities going forward, certainly for 2024. And how much runway is the current balance sheet going to give you?
We expect it to go the funds to take us through to the middle of 25 because of all the cost-saving exercises we've undertaken, taking $14 million of cost out of the business. We're running at a burn rate of around about $1 million a month, covers all the costs of the company and the clinical trials that are ongoing. It's really helped by the non-dilutive funding we've got both from Parkinson's UK and the Australian government grants as well to do another study in a related hematological blood cancer that we're looking at as well. So yeah, I think looking at the balance sheet, the first quarter of this year was still messy as we got through the transaction that we did with the sale of the business, the factory. The next quarter it will be clean. Again, sort of looking at reasons why the share price is currently where it is and where it will clean up quickly is when people understand and look at the balance sheet at the end of quarter 2 or quarter 4 financial year. That's when the rubber will hit the road, I think.
Okay, and just to finish up, what is the next material piece of news investors should be looking for? Will it be the results of that phase 2 myelofibrosis trial? Is that what we're looking for towards the end?
I think when you look at the way that biotech stocks respond to phase 2 trials, very often the first sign of life coming into the stock is when the study gets fully recruited. Because people then know that if the study is fully recruited, that you are on time to deliver the results when you say you're going to. So people should look for when we're fully recruited. We expect that to be the end of June. As I said, we're over 60% now. And I think that starts the clock ticking. That's when people will say, okay, I need to be in this stock now because they are going to give data. And then the next real big point is that first week of December is the American Society of Hematology meeting. We will have data at that meeting.
Okay, great. Gary, thank you for your time today. That was fantastic, and hopefully we'll get you back to give us an update on those results. So very exciting times. Thank you for your time today.
Thanks, Manny. I look forward to it.
All right, have a great weekend.